That's what most people believe. But what if the truth is exactly the opposite? Millions of years before farming, before bread, before the first cities ever existed, our ancestors were already drawn to naturally fermented fruit. Even more astonishing, your body still carries the evolutionary legacy of that ancient habit. The beer in your hand isn't just a modern drink. It's the final chapter of a story that began over 10 million years ago, a story that helped shape the course of human civilization itself. Imagine a dense African rainforest nearly 10 million years ago. There were no farms, no villages, and certainly no breweries. Only towering trees, the sounds of insects echoing through the canopy, and ripe fruit scattered across the forest floor. To most animals, those fallen fruits were simply another meal. But something remarkable was happening inside them. Wild yeast, invisible to the naked eye, fed on the fruit's sugars and quietly transformed them into ethanol. As the fruit ripened and fermented, it released a sweet aroma that traveled through the forest, signaling one important thing: more calories. For our ape-like ancestors, finding these fruits wasn't an accident. It was an evolutionary advantage. But here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. Around this time, our lineage evolved a genetic mutation that dramatically increased the efficiency of an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase 4, ADH4. This enzyme allowed our ancestors to break down ethanol far more effectively than many other primates, enabling them to safely consume fermented fruit and extract its valuable energy. This discovery inspired evolutionary biologist Robert Dudley to propose the Drunken Monkey Hypothesis. The idea that our attraction to alcohol didn't begin in taverns or breweries, but deep within ancient forests. And this isn't merely speculation. In 2022, researchers studying wild black-handed spider monkeys in Panama found that the animals consistently preferred fruit containing 1–2% alcohol. Even more importantly, chemical analysis confirmed that their bodies actively metabolized the ethanol. Our relationship with alcohol, it seems, began millions of years before the first human ever learned to brew beer. For millions of years, alcohol was a lucky accident of nature. Then, at some point, humans decided not to wait for fermented fruit anymore. They began making it themselves. That turning point emerged from an unlikely place: Raqefet Cave in present-day Israel. In 2018, archaeologists led by Professor Li Liu analyzed stone mortars carved directly into the cave floor, a burial site used by the Natufian people around 13000 years ago. Hidden inside those ancient depressions were microscopic traces of starch granules that had been crushed, heated, and fermented. The evidence revealed something astonishing. These people followed a surprisingly sophisticated brewing process. They first allowed wild grains to germinate, creating malt. They then crushed the grains, heated them with water to convert starch into fermentable sugars, and finally left the mixture to ferment using wild yeast. In other words, they were brewing beer thousands of years before large-scale agriculture appeared. But here's the question that still divides archaeologists today. Why would hunter-gatherers spend enormous amounts of time collecting wild cereals if they weren't farming? One provocative answer is known as the beer before bread hypothesis. Rather than cultivating grain to bake bread, some researchers argue that humans may have first domesticated cereals for something far more irresistible: the world's first beer. If beer truly inspired people to harvest wild grain, its influence didn't stop there. About 12000 years ago, in what is now southeastern Turkey, hunter-gatherers accomplished something that should have been impossible. They built Göbekli Tepe. Long before cities, kings, or organized governments existed, hundreds of people gathered to carve and transport limestone pillars weighing up to 50 tons. The site remains the oldest known monumental sanctuary ever discovered. But one question has puzzled archaeologists for decades. How do you convince hundreds of strangers to work together when there are no wages, no armies, and no written laws? Part of the answer may have been found inside enormous limestone basins scattered throughout the site. Some could hold more than 160 liters of liquid. Chemical analysis detected oxalate, a compound commonly left behind during the brewing of cereal-based beverages. This suggests that large quantities of fermented drinks were being prepared for communal feasts. Beer wasn't simply consumed for pleasure. It likely played a central role in religious ceremonies, ecstatic rituals, and massive celebrations that rewarded cooperation and strengthened social bonds. Perhaps the first great monuments of humanity were not built by force. Perhaps they were built by shared belief, shared feasts, and shared cups of beer. While the people of the Near East were perfecting malted barley, another brewing revolution was unfolding thousands of kilometers away, this time in ancient China. At the Qiaotou archaeological site in Zhejiang province, dating back nearly 9,000 years, researchers uncovered painted pottery placed beside human burials. Inside these vessels, microscopic residues revealed the remains of an ancient fermented drink made from rice, job's tears, and underground tubers. But the most extraordinary discovery wasn't the ingredients. It was the microorganisms. Scientists identified spores from Aspergillus and Rhizopus molds, along with yeast. The oldest known evidence of using mold cultures to convert starch into sugar while fermentation occurred at the same time. This technology became known as Q, or fermentation starter cakes. Unlike the Middle Eastern method of producing malt by sprouting grain, Ku relied on naturally occurring molds that released powerful enzymes capable of breaking starch into fermentable sugars. It was a completely independent scientific breakthrough. That accidental discovery, perhaps beginning with cooked grains left to mold in a warm, humid climate, would eventually give rise to some of Asia's most iconic fermented beverages, including sake, baijiu, and makgeolli. Two continents, two completely different technologies, one shared human obsession, unlocking the hidden power of fermentation. As the first civilizations emerged, beer became far more than a drink. In Sumer, workers were often paid in beer, receiving daily rations recorded on clay tablets. Beer was so important that the Sumerians even worshipped Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing, preserving recipes in hymns. In Babylon, the Code of Hammurabi imposed severe punishments on tavern owners who diluted beer. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, pyramid builders received several liters of beer each day as part of their wages. Beer had become food, currency, law, and one of the foundations upon which civilizations were built. So, the next time you crack open a cold beer, remember, you aren't simply enjoying a beverage. You're tasting the outcome of 10 million years of evolution and 13,000 years of human innovation. From fermented fruit on an ancient forest floor, to sacred ceremonies, to the workers who built pyramids, beer has quietly accompanied humanity through every major chapter of civilization. But now, I'd like to hear from you. What surprised you the most? Was it that our ancestors evolved to digest alcohol? Or that beer may have existed before bread itself? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy uncovering the hidden stories behind ancient humans, don't forget to subscribe, because history is often far stranger than fiction.